here, your real independent candidate for Clarinda. And today I'm thrilled to be joined with Kevin Poulter from the Save Kingswood group. He's the president there. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And that's a beautiful picture you've got behind yourself there. Is that the golf course?
Yes, when the retarding basin rises enough, it all goes over the golf course. And they want to put units and roads over that and do away with the aquifer that holds millions of litres.
Yeah. So, and then what's happening with the insurance for houses?
Well, we believe that houses in most of the area won't be insurable, and also downstream, and it'll affect other areas outside Kingswood and Dingley village because water goes downstream.
Yeah, so the golf course, what's the technology used at the golf course to stop flooding of Dingley village?
Well, it starts with Melbourne Water-owned retarding basin, which is another word for a dam, where all the street water from Clayton comes down and gets held because the pipes below Dingley village can't handle all the water at once. And Dingley village is already flooding and downstream's flooding, but it'll be very much worse if they proceeded with the development.
Yeah, wow. So I've got you here today because when I decided that I was going to run for Clarinda, I'd heard about Kingswood Golf Course. I heard that it mentioned there were issues there, but I had no idea what was going on until, I reached out to you and you've been so kind in helping me understand the matter. So today I thought we could go through things so that others in the community that might not know what's going on can understand the issues as well. I find the initial illegal sale back in 2014 very interesting. I know it's done and dusted now, so it's not always something that you guys like to dwell on too much, but if you could just touch on that, that would be amazing.
Well, to sell off a golf course, which is made up of members, there has to be a certain percentage of members saying, okay, let's do it. And the board tried to convince members that they were in trouble when in fact they had money in the bank, and the proposed partner down at Frankston was up to $2 million in debt. There wasn't enough member votes, but the board went ahead anyway. And then to stack the votes, they invited Frankston members to join for $1 each. So it went through, but it certainly wasn't legal, and the Supreme Court agreed, but they didn't apply a remedy or a fix to it.
And why? Why didn't they try and undo the illegal sale?
They called it latches, which is a legal term for you took too long to bring up the matter. But the Dingley Village golf course members were trying to raise $200,000 to get QCs into the Supreme Court. So that took time. And because he said that would also cause commercial damage, he wouldn't apply a remedy.
Okay. So lies and deception and corruption right from the get-go.
Yes, I suppose you could say that. Certainly the judge agreed that it was illegal.
Yeah. And so there's been a lot of, so since 2014, Australian Super have then proposed inappropriate overdevelopment. And so many residents object to building on the site. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, because it's our central park in Dingley Village and an urban forest, exactly what councils and government are pouring millions into because of climate change. And we already have this park with advanced trees. It's a wildlife sanctuary for thousands of birds, including endangered. It filters the air and, of course, provides oxygen. Also, the village just can't cope with a 20% increase in their town's population and still provide services they need. A shopping centre, for example, the supermarket car park's full twice a day to overflowing. And Australian Super had no right to purchase the park before a rezoning. They didn't consult council prior, and they didn't consult residents, even though it's a government requirement to do that. And also Gulf Victoria put that in their rules as well.
Yeah. And so how many people have objected to Kingswood?
We had 8,000 objections received at council.
Wow.
And that's 98% of the respondents were against the proposal.
So do you think Australian Super could have done better?
Absolutely. They didn't consult council or residents. Instead, they freely admit that they chose not to consult, and they spent, on our estimation, over $1 million on plans, lawyers, and spin doctors to try and fight us. They never agreed to sit down and have a talk with us. In fact, the DVCA, which is the Residents Association, has never heard from them. We had some very early talks, but they were sit and listen, this is what's happening type of talks.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a complete lack of community consultation in most of the local issues. Would you say that there's been quite a bit of deception?
When the Golf Course Advisory Committee asked about deception, I produced a page on some of their many deceptions. It starts with none of their advertising in the dossier, flyers, or webpage says who the developer is. So they're so proud of their development that they hide the name and instead call it Dingley Village 3172. We believe that the spin doctors came up with that to try and get people to think that it was really Save Kingswood, when in fact it's their big sell to try and push us to have a development that we particularly do not want or need.
I know when I came down to meet with the community at the Kingswood Golf Course recently, and you showed me the plans, I couldn't believe it. Over 700 three-story units. And there's currently no three-story residential housing in Kingswood at the moment, is there?
In Dingley Village, there is no three-story units. In fact, all the way to Nepean Highway outside the council building, there are still no three-story units.
Yeah, and over 800 dwellings in total. I just couldn't believe those plans were so shonky when I looked at them. And what you were saying before, a 20% growth in the population. How else do you think that the development will overwhelm Dingley Village?
Dingley Village can't cope with a 20% increase because we already have enough trouble with traffic and we don't have rail. It's about an hour in peak hour away from a railway station. We have a minimal bus service. It can take up to 40 minutes to leave on Spring Road onto the Westall Road extension at the current time, and yet that's going to be one of the main exits for 823 dwellings and therefore around 2,000 more people and the magnitude of cars that they represent.
Yeah, unbelievable. So the matter's currently before the government at the moment, and what I'm noticing in other local issues is that decisions that would usually be made by the local council are being taken off the local council and given to the government to make these decisions. And it's almost like we're seeing with this government just a complete overriding of, democratic systems and procedures that are in place to protect our communities and protect our environment. Why is the matter before the government at the moment, and what is the outcome?
Yes, a very good question. Before Dan, residents had more say in their neighbourhoods, usually at council level. It appears the planning minister, Richard Wynne, agreed with that democratic method, as when he was talking about Kingswood, he said, "I always encourage councils to make decisions in line with the expectations of their local communities. Planning outcomes are always better when the voice of the community is heard." Council rejected 3 applications. Some have forgotten the bizarre second application, which included scorched earth and a massive temporary dam. Then Mr. Wynne was apparently invited to retire early from his portfolio, replaced by a minister who had a conflict of interest, then replaced by another minister for Kingswood matters.
Because they started a committee, didn't they?
Yes, instead of going with what council said, 3 times abandoning or rejecting the applications, they appealed to the government, who set up a golf course redevelopment advisory committee. And that committee had hearings rather like VCAT, and we were represented by myself and others. And so the developer also brought in a QC and other lawyers to try and fight for their case. The committee made their decision and put it on the minister's desk in March, and we haven't heard anything since. It's now looking like no decision will be advised to people before the election. And that sounds a little bit like deception in itself, because we don't know who to vote for based on what the decision is.
Yeah, it's a bit of a political football. I know, I've been working on content for my campaign at the moment, and I mean, this is exactly what it is. This type of public or this type of decision making should be available to us. This type of decision making that's having such a negative impact on our lives. These records should be available for us to see. And so what is the political support like for Kingswood?
Well, every Labor, Liberal and independent politician like yourself, Caroline, or candidate for our region we have spoken to, is either totally against development or agrees it's way, way too much. Mark Dreyfus, the now Attorney General, said, "Large-scale developments can make or break a community. It's important to get it right, and the currently proposed development of the Kingswood Golf Course is not even close." Martin Pakula said very early in the piece, "I share the concerns of local residents. Failing to respond to these legitimate queries is simply rude and arrogant. It is about time the minister provided Dingley residents with some answers and some certainty. It's not too much to ask."
It's just disgraceful, isn't it? I think that these politicians have forgotten who pays their wages and who they're meant to be working for, who they're meant to be representing. I think both of the major parties are on this agenda to push us into an urban overdevelopment plan that really we're just not consenting to. And they're doing it in a way that they're also, out in these rural areas, they're really stripping the funding out of those communities, so they can't get the education they need out there. They can't get, the hospital services they need out there. The transport out there needs upgrades. And I really love when I receive your emails and you compare what's happening here to somewhere like America. Tell us a little bit about that.
I've watched probably well over 100 American TV programs showing people that are seeking new homes or existing homes or renovating. And it just never ceases to amaze me in a country that's so much bigger than a population than in Australia. They have half-acre blocks and huge areas in their backyards, and yet we think we've got to cram ourselves into sardine blocks where the kids have nowhere to play but the street. And of course, some houses, many of them have too many cars. One of my neighbours has 5 cars in the house next door, and
Wow.
they've got to have a place to park. It's just a fact of life that the little transport we have in Dingley Village needs to be cars still, because there's no alternatives. The existing buses don't go to where their workplace is. And Dingley's a little bit unique in that situation, that we only have a couple of exits and only a couple of ways to get to work.
Tell me a little bit about, you mentioned the other day that they're currently putting chemicals over the grounds.
Well, they were using Roundup, and we're not talking about the normal Roundup that you can buy in Bunnings. It's industrial grade Roundup on any overgrowth rather than using brush cutters. So you've got echidnas, snakes, skinks and lizards that would obviously not survive some of this. And the spray over sprays into the yards as the fences open weave. We brought it up with them, and they eventually admitted they were using Roundup, which is banned in many countries and the subject of billions of dollars of successful litigation overseas.
Wow.
So Australian Super has a lot to answer for regarding their claim to be environmentally friendly, because they constantly ask to cut down or apply to cut down trees, and without asking, they certainly cut down those that are not regulated, and they continue to spray.
And I did want to say a big congratulations to you, Kevin, for everything you're doing. I think it's wonderful. Yeah, I know. I know you're up late working so hard to try and, protect our homes and stop this from happening to our community.
Well, thank you, Caroline. We appreciate your interest and support. It's always good to have more and more supporters, and you're right in there, supporting us totally to the best of your abilities.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and I hope that gave everyone a little bit more of an insight into what's happening for the community in Dingley Village at the Save Kingswood Golf Course. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you later.